Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, Palestinian terrorists have broken the ceasefire with Gaza by resuming rocket attacks on Israel. The city of Ashkelon was targeted by a Grad rocket early Tuesday morning. Israeli security sources stated that the rocket was an upgraded mid- to long-range missile, an improved version of the rockets that were previously fired into Israel. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade claimed responsibility for the attack, saying we must fight the enemy with all means necessary. This is the first incident in 3 months since Egypt helped to broker a ceasefire agreement during Operation Pillar of Defense.
After a group of Palestinian prisoners began a hunger strike last week, a series of riots were sparked throughout Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem. Palestinians hurled stones and violently rioted at the Temple Mount after Friday prayers. One Israeli police officer was lightly injured when the mobs pelted him with rocks. The police were forced to disperse the crowd with stun grenades. Tensions spread to Hebron, where the IDF used crowd control measures to stop the protesters from blocking the main highway as they burned tires and pelted cars with rocks. The U.S. State Department released a statement calling for Israel and the Palestinians to exercise maximum restraint. The statement appealed to both sides to not only refrain from provocative actions that could destabilize conditions on the ground, but to consider positive steps to de-escalate the current tensions.
The Students' Union of Oxford University has proposed a complete boycott of the Jewish state. The Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Campaign, otherwise known as the BDS movement, is calling for the Oxford student body to boycott Israeli institutions, goods, and produce. A representative of the school who is opposed to the move said, "I am surprised that a motion to support a movement that was described by the president of Harvard University as anti-Semitic is even under discussion. My fellow students were repulsed at the idea of being associated with the BDS movement, especially considering past racist statements and Nazi allusions made by its founder, Omar Barghouti. We voted unanimously against any involvement with a movement that would apply a double standard to Israel." This controversial vote was debated just days after an Oxford class was stunned by a British member of Parliament's treatment of an Israeli student. Erin Viner has more on that story.
A British legislator stunned students and faculty at Oxford University when he stormed out of a debate after he realized that his opponent was Israeli. George Galloway publicly debated in favor of an Israeli withdrawal from Judea and Samaria against a student from the university. Galloway insisted that a unilateral withdrawal should happen immediately. As the student expressed his opinion, the British member of Parliament interrupted him, asking if he was Israeli. When the student answered yes, Galloway stormed out of the room, saying that he does not recognize Israel and won't debate Israelis. The parliamentarian later released a statement reading that he refused to debate an Israeli that he described as a supporter of the apartheid state of Israel for a simple reason: no recognition, no normalization, just boycott, divestment, and sanctions until that apartheid state is defeated. He went on to say that he will never debate with Israelis or speak to their media. Galloway has been publicly accused of racism, and representatives of the university have expressed shock that such a prominent member of the community could behave in such a manner over the matter of his opponent's nationality.
A Hezbollah operative is being tried in Cyprus for plotting terrorist attacks against Israelis. According to Cypriot authorities, Hossam Taleb Yaqub has been charged with membership in a criminal organization whose aim is to carry out missions in any part of the world, including the Cyprus Republic, against Israeli citizens. The 24-year-old Lebanese citizen, who also carries a Swedish passport, is said to have logged arrival times of Israeli flights to the island. He admitted that Hezbollah operatives trained him to use rocket-propelled grenades, AK-47 assault rifles, and M16 machine guns. He traveled to cities such as Amsterdam, Antalya, and Lyon to conduct surveillance of the Israeli and Jewish communities for Hezbollah. The United States and Israel have repeatedly requested that the European Union declare Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. It's now hoped that the trial of this Hezbollah operative will further add to the growing list of reasons why the EU should rule against this terrorist group.
Iran has announced plans to expand its nuclear program by building 16 new atomic facilities throughout the country. Just days before the meeting with the P5+1 in Kazakhstan, Iran's state news agency released details of the discovery of new uranium deposits on the country's southern coast. This latest development comes as Israel called for the total removal of all uranium from Iran. Ahead of the nuclear talks, an Israeli official said that the goal must be clear: an end to Iran's uranium enrichment and the transfer out of the country of all uranium that has already been enriched. The official added that it is preferable that these goals be met through diplomacy, but if negotiations fail, these goals will be met through another method. The United States, Russia, China, Britain, Germany, and France entered the first meeting with the Islamic Republic in more than 8 months, saying that they were willing to make compromises on sanctions if Iran agreed to make concessions on its nuclear program. Iran previously responded that it would not close the Fordo site and would continue to enrich uranium.
Israel is closely monitoring the transfer of weapons in Syria. According to Israeli military officials, Israel is carefully watching the movement of weapons to prevent them from being transferred to terrorist groups. Among the terrorists is a cluster of al-Qaeda fighters who have joined the Syrian opposition, as well as Hezbollah extremists who fight for Assad. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly said that he will not let advanced weapons fall into the hands of Hezbollah or rebel groups. Israel is concerned about the transfer of these sophisticated weapons to the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror group and the possibility that al-Qaeda operatives could obtain the weapons if the Assad regime collapses.
A group of 53 Ethiopian Christians have been arrested in Saudi Arabia for practicing their faith. The Christians, who are mostly foreign workers in the oil-rich Gulf state, were arrested at a private home that they were using as an underground church. 3 of the church leaders have been charged with attempting to convert Muslims to Christianity. In 2011, 35 Ethiopian Christians were arrested and brutally tortured for practicing their faith. 1 year ago, the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia declared that it is necessary to destroy all of the churches in the Arabian Peninsula. In an interview with Fox News' Nina Shea, the director of the Hudson Institute's Center for Religious Freedom said that these arrests are part of Saudi Arabia's policy to ban non-Muslim houses of worship and actually hunt down Christians in private homes.
Anti-Semitic attacks have risen by more than 58% in France. According to a report released by the Security Unit of France's Jewish communities, there were 614 documented anti-Semitic attacks in France in 2012. This is a dramatic increase over the 389 anti-Semitic attacks the previous year. Referring to the shooting at a Jewish school in Toulouse, in which an Islamic terrorist gunned down 3 young children and a rabbi, the report said 2012 has been a year of unprecedented violence against Jews in France. The report noted that violent acts against Jews peaked after the 2 worst attacks in 2012. In the 10 days after the Toulouse shootings, 90 anti-Semitic attacks were reported, and in the 8 days which followed the bombing of a kosher grocery store, 28 violent anti-Semitic acts were recorded. The report detailed that physical anti-Semitic assaults doubled in France last year.
Israel successfully tested the Arrow 3 missile defense system for the first time last week. This highly sophisticated system operates from space to intercept advanced missiles such as the Iranian-made Shihab-3 rocket, as well as other long-range projectiles, while also providing an additional defense layer in space. Working in tandem with the Arrow 2, this new development gives the IDF 2 to 3 opportunities to intercept long-range missiles. The Arrow 3 is a joint venture between the Israel Aerospace Industries and the Missile Defense Agency of the U.S. Department of Defense. Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak said that this is an important milestone for the State of Israel's multi-layered defense system, which includes the Iron Dome, David Slingshot, Arrow 2, and now Arrow 3. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Ari Abramovitch, the head of the Friends of Israel of Keren HaYesod. Ari, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh.
Ari, tell our guests a little bit about what is Keren HaYesod?
Keren HaYesod is a legacy. It's a legend in Israel. It's the right arm of the State of Israel. It is the official fundraising branch, the fundraising arm of the state, where all those around the world who want to be a part of the miracle that is the State of Israel can support us and be a part of this historic mission.
You know, Keren HaYesod literally means the foundation fund. It's been around for 90 years. What are some of the things it did to find the State of Israel?
Well, I think in every generation, it's been around for over 90 years, since 1920, and in every generation they really rise to the calling. From draining the swamps to the electrical infrastructure of the state, to making the desert bloom, to settling the land, to bringing the Jews home. This is what Keren HaYesod has been doing for 90 years. It really transcends any specific government, whether it's right-wing or left-wing. This is about the State of Israel and the Jewish people. That's what Keren HaYesod is about.
You know, it's interesting. Recently, Keren HaYesod has stopped just fundraising from Jews around the world, but has opened it up to Christians. Why does Keren HaYesod believe that Christians have a part to play in this fulfillment of biblical prophecy?
Well, I think we have a responsibility not only for our fellow Jews around the world, but for the entire world, for all of mankind. We need to be a light unto the nations. And right now, the world needs light more than ever before. We're facing lies and distortions by the media and the UN, the EU. We're facing enemies exponentially larger than us that want to wipe us out. We have a responsibility to reach out with truth to the world and tell them what Israel is really about. Now, don't get me wrong. God will protect us. He has a covenant with the Jewish people, and He will bring us back home and fulfill His promises. The only question is, will it be through you? Will it be through all those around the world who fear God and not the nations and not enemies and not large armies, but fear God and want to be a part of this? We're in the time of Purim right now, when Mordechai went to Esther as we were facing annihilation, just as we are now. And he said to her, salvation and redemption will come to the Jewish people, but will it be through you? And that's really what we're doing to the Christians, to the nations of the world, offering them an opportunity to be vehicles and vessels in the redemption and salvation of the Jewish people.
So Ari, what are some of the projects that you're working on with Christian friends around the world? What are some of the things that speak to them as, representative of Keren HaYesod?
I think everything we're doing and everything we've done, as we said, we went back 90 years, and we've always we rose to the call of every generation. And when I look at what's happening right now in Israel, we have to not only bring the bodies back to the land, bring the Jewish people home, but also help them to settle in. We have Ethiopian absorption centers throughout the country. Imagine what it's like 2,000 years to be in a different culture, different society, different language, and then come across the world to return to your family who looks different than you, who sounds different than you, different culture. We're allowing them to not only return and absorb and really become a part of the Jewish family, but also connect to their own Jewish heritage, to who they are as Jews that they haven't had the right to learn and to know throughout history. We do absorption centers, we're making the desert bloom, we're helping the infrastructure of the state. Every element of the prophecies of the Jewish people returning home, that's what we do at Keren HaYesod.
You know, one of the projects that you're working on is bringing back the Ethiopian Jews. You were in charge of all the Aliyah in the 80s and the 90s, and now again to bring back the remaining Ethiopian Jews in Ethiopia. Why is it so important to the State of Israel to bring these Jews from Ethiopia to Israel?
Well, it's not just the Ethiopian Jews, it's Jews from throughout the world, but Ethiopian Jews in specific are somewhat helpless there. They don't have the funds or the finances to come back, and it's upon us to do that. You know, it's a funny story, Josh. When I first came to Israel, I myself needed to be absorbed.
I needed to learn Hebrew, and I applied for an absorption program to learn Hebrew, but I couldn't read the application. And I applied accidentally for an Ethiopian absorption program. And they accepted me thinking if I'm applying, I must be Ethiopian. And I spent the first 5 months of my life here really with Ethiopian Jews, and they're so happy because they recognize that Israel is the first country in the history of the world to bring in blacks not to be slaves, but to be brothers. And that's what they are. It's family. And we're bringing our family home. The Jewish family is returning home.
You know, one of the amazing stories of the Ethiopian Jews is that they've been cut off from the rest of Israel for 2,000 years, yet their Torah that there was found is the exact same Torah that we have. So it shows that over 2,000 years, the Torah has been preserved. How is that inspirational to the rest of the Jewish community and to Christians?
I think it's an affirmation that the Word of God is unchanging. How can you imagine, before the printing press, before anything, there was a Torah that was sent to the tribe of Dan, is what we understand the Ethiopian Jews are, and they were sent to Ethiopia disconnected and printing over and over again, handwritten, and it hasn't changed. But when you see the way it's played out in their lives, we, before the holiday of Passover, which is coming soon, we go and we take our kalim, our utensils, our dishes, and we boil them. They just break theirs and make new. They have different customs, but the way they live and their fear of God and their relationship to God is exactly the same. And it's just an affirmation, again, that we're part of the same family and we're returning home.
Ari, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I think that right now it may not make rational, secular sense to stand with Israel against the entire world, but it's the calling of the generation. It's the only way to truly stand with God and place your faith in God and cast your lot with the Jewish people. This is a historic hour. It's a historic opportunity to really become a part of the people of Israel by casting your lot with us and supporting us in this mission, in this miracle that is the state of Israel.
Thank you, Ari, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, Shining Light from Israel.
The dairy industry is as much about cows as it is innovation. And it's here on Kibbutz Afikim, just south of the Sea of Galilee, that the world's best dairy farming technologies are conceived. 25 years ago, a member of the kibbutz named Eli Peles came up with a simple but revolutionary idea: the world's first electronic milk meter. No more wasted time measuring the milk by hand. This innovation showed how many liters of milk has been produced by a cow in real time. The kibbutz dairy company, Afi Milk, quickly became a powerhouse in dairy farm and herd management. The Afi Milk R&D team is constantly updating its technologies. It has created hardware and software to monitor and direct each cow's performance.
We want to get as much milk as we possibly can out of each cow. However, the water part of the milk we're not interested in. The water we can add later if we need to. So we need to know the solids of the milk. The solids are what's worth something. The Afi Lab will give you an exact count of the solids in the milk. If you do not know the milk solids, you're feeding the cow blindly, and you're most likely wasting a lot of money.
So when the Vietnamese corporation TH Milk decided to boost milk consumption in the Asian Republic, it made sense to turn to Afi Milk. The Vietnam project is considered the largest venture of its kind in the world. With a budget of $1.2 billion, Afi Milk has been saddled with the challenge of building 12 dairies from scratch.
It's a great challenge and a very exciting opportunity for us to be the leaders in this project. We were the best team to deliver the technology transfer that should be done in order to make that people that has never dealt with milk production, they can, handle and manage those large dairy farms.
Israeli President Shimon Peres recently paid a state visit to Vietnam and toured the Israeli-built dairy farms. Afimilk is only a small part of the burgeoning business ties between Israel and Vietnam, but it is probably the component that put Israel on the map for most Vietnamese. Peres even alluded to Afimilk when he spoke to reporters after a state dinner in Hanoi.
The greatest champion we have in Israel is the cow. And by the way, the best milk. So we're very glad we started with a milky beginning. It's very promising.
Vietnamese President Truong Thanh Sang said that his country is seeking further help from Israel to increase the use of modern agricultural technology and know-how. Afimilk's computerized milking systems can be found in over 50 countries. In an effort to boost the Palestinian economy, Afimilk established a farm in the West Bank town of Hebron. Afimilk officials believe that this type of cooperation contributes to building trust and coexistence.
We absolutely love working with Palestinians as well as other less developed markets because we can change lives. We can truly change lives.
Back at the cowshed, and the dairy workers are calling the cows into their positions. The music coming out of the speakers is to keep the cows in high spirits. After all, a happy cow will produce the most milk.
They are very curious, and some of them are very funny, they want to play. But they're cute animals. Good girls.
Indeed, Israel's four-legged milk manufacturers are moveless superstars. This is Viva Levi Press for Israel Up Close.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Welcome to another episode of the ICJ report. We are just down a few days from the Passover holidays. The Passover season is one of the most important seasons in the Jewish calendar, where the Jewish people is commemorating the liberation from Egypt and the wonderful way how God delivered the Jewish people out of bondage and out of slavery. Every year it's celebrated by a big traditional meal which is called the Passover Seder. And the International Christian Embassy over the past few years helped many hundreds of families all over this country to celebrate this Passover Seder in a way which gives them dignity and also the joy of that holiday. Today we have with us the 8th Director of the International Christian Embassy, Nicole Yoder, which is working in that field for many years. And Nicole, welcome to that program. And also I would like to ask you, we are helping those hundreds of families over the Passover season. If you look to Israel, it's a very wealthy country. Is this aid really needed?
It certainly is really needed, Jürgen. I know that about almost 25% of the population in Israel today live below the poverty line. And particularly at the holidays, welfare departments are flooded with requests for people wanting to celebrate this holiday with dignity.
So what are the typical people which we are helping now in this coming holiday season?
The people that we're assisting are single-parent families, elderly, maybe new immigrant families, families who maybe are suffering from illness, sickness, and they're living off of government pensions that really give only a minimal subsistence for them.
I know you met over the years which you are working hundreds of people here in this land. Could you give us some examples in particular relating to Passover, what you experienced over the past years?
Well, one family particularly comes to my mind. We were delivering food packages to families at the holiday, and this family, when we came to their door with this package of food, the woman saw the food and she just burst into tears.
Wow.
She's a single parent with 2 children, a Russian immigrant whose husband had left her due to alcoholism, and she couldn't speak Hebrew. Her 7-year-old son translated for her, And I just remember from that visit how that apartment looked like someone had moved out of it with a few pieces of broken furniture in it and this weeping woman.
So this help is really touching lives and changing lives.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And how is it with the welfare organizations? Because I understand from living for so many years here on this land that sometimes help from Christians can be looked with quite some suspicion upon. So do you have some testimonies from them?
You know, social welfare has always been so grateful. I remember talking with different social workers who don't really have budget to answer all of this need. And so they've come to us actually asking for help. And we've received some warm thank you letters. I have one here with me of a social worker who told us that 70 families in her department received help at the holiday that wouldn't have received it or been able to celebrate with dignity without that help. And she tells us that the fact that there are Christians around the world who understand the crisis that these families are in and are willing to help them, it gives them hope for a better tomorrow.
And that means also the help what we are giving to people, you always make sure that people understand this help is coming from Christians.
Absolutely. Every gift that we give out goes with a card that gives holiday greetings from Christians around the world.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. This is very exciting what you are doing here in this land. And this means also to our listeners that there is a very practical way how we can really touch the lives of hundreds of families here in this land and make a real difference. We have put it on our hearts this year to double the amount of people which we want to bless over this Passover season, and we want to invite you to partner with us. Only $100 can make the difference for an entire family. So if you make a donation of $100, you can change the Passover season for one family here in Israel, and we will make sure that this family hears that there are Christians all over the world which do care for them. The Passover season is a celebration of harvest. The Passover season in particular commemorates the first fruits of the harvest, which represents the entire harvest for the entire year. And the Jewish people came to Jerusalem to bring forth an offering representing the first fruits of their ingathering. And I want to encourage you today to consider over this Passover season to give a first fruit offering to the Jewish people as you change their lives here over Passover in Jerusalem in 2013. We are your embassy here in Jerusalem. May the Lord bless you out of Zion.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.